Welcome to Humanizing Leadership. I'm your host, Louise H. Reed. Each week I sit down for 40 minutes and have a brilliant conversation with an expert guest where we discuss topics for next-gen leaders. On today's episode, I'm joined by Rocki Howard, Chief Diversity Officer at SmartRecruiters. She is an amazing woman who has risen through the ranks in the recruiting space and has been named one of Empower's top 100 global ethnic minority leaders. The focus of our conversation today, doing diversity recruiting right. Listen in, my friends, and enjoy the show. Rocki Howard, my friend, welcome to the show.
Oh, Louise, I'm so excited to be here today. Isn't it great when bold, brilliant, badass women get together for a cause? I'm so excited.
Bold, brilliant, badass. I mean, those who have listened regularly can tell already why I needed to have you on this show. Words that I use frequently. And bold, brilliant, badass is the Chief Diversity Officer at SmartRecruiters, and a woman who does so many other things. You really live those words well. I want to just jump right on into this meaty conversation that I know you and I are going to have. One of the many things that I know is important to you is disrupting the intersection of diversity and recruitment. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yes. So, I've spent my whole career in recruiting and talent acquisition. At this point, 30 plus years. And what's interesting to me is over those years, I've seen the importance of diversity and the talk about diversity change since I came into the industry in the late 90s into where we are today. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that I've seen the outcomes really change, right? We're having the same exact conversations we were having multiple years ago. It is crazy that if you think about it, 3 weeks ago, we celebrated as Walgreens just named their new CEO, but it's one of 3 Black women on the Fortune 500. I'm not sure that that's something we should be celebrating. It is, because what she's done is phenomenal. But if you think about it, 3 out of 500 is not a passing score. And so what I truly recognize is that and if you look across the continuum of diversity, there's so many areas that we need to work in, right? And I think those of us who are passionate about it need to take our skills and what we do well to help solve the problem. What I do is I recruit. Right. Once a recruiter, you're always a recruiter. And so for me, it's about taking this passion that I have around diversity and around giving opportunities to people and intersecting it with the skills that I have, having been in the recruiting industry for the last 30 years, and say, let's blow this thing up and let's fix it, right? Because I'm tired of people talking about it and I want people to actually do something about it.
Oh my gosh. Tired of people talking about it, want people to actually do something about it. I could write a song about that if I was a songwriter, like really.
No kidding.
And so this is we could spend the entire show on the how we do that. But can you talk to us a little bit about sort of your philosophy and some frameworks or tips that you have about how we can start to do that better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you think about recruiting diverse talent, right? SmartRecruiters has done this phenomenal thing. So we have created a whole diversity hiring toolkit that is free to any organization of any size who wants to take it. It's not back in the days where you have to, listen to our pitch or do anything like that. It's important for us that people who really want to move forward in terms of their diversity hiring have the opportunity and the resources to do it. So Louise, I'll make sure you have the link. Feel free to share it with your audience. But at the end of the day, I think that there's 4 key pillars to really getting to diversity hiring success. One is about diversity brand equity. how does your company show up in the world, and can diverse talent see themselves in how you present yourself, right? What's your diversity brand equity? 2, do you have a strategic sourcing process, right? Do you source strategically? So look, those of us who are in the game know that just posting an ad and praying does not work. It hasn't worked in years. And guess what, guys? Just because you now post a job to some diversity website, that's not the key either. You have to have a strategic sourcing strategy that not only helps you attract talent from the outside, but helps you build and focus on the talent you have internally, which is usually a big miss. Do you have fair hiring processes, right? Have you eliminated bias as much as you can from your internal and external hiring processes? Do you have a diverse selection team that helps you to eliminate bias as you're interviewing, right? So it's fair and competitive hiring. And then fourthly, do you have organizational support? Okay. So here's one thing I believe for sure. Every business problem that was truly taken seriously and resolved, it's because leaders had it as part of their performance review and part of their bonus payout, right? So you want to
what gets measured gets done, right? That's a quote we hear time and time again.
Absolutely. Right. And have you not only done that, but have you trained people in terms of not the annual, here's my harassment, here's my, my annual policy check, watch the 30-minute video, for compliance purposes, prove that you sign off on it. But how are you training your leaders, your managers, your supervisors, and other people in the organization about their role in terms of diversity, right? Because ultimately, as a chief diversity officer, as a CEO, as a chief people officer, we can't own diversity in an organization. It belongs to everybody. So I think when you think big picture, and you can tell, I love this, the assessment that we've written is 130 questions. So I could talk for hours about this. But I think when you think about high level, 4 things that I could focus on to really start to get better at attracting diverse talent, that's where it starts. I will say one other thing. Like I said, my expertise is at the intersection of diversity and recruiting. But guys, diversity cannot live in a vacuum of equity and inclusion and belonging. So if you get the recruiting right and you're attracting diverse talent, but you haven't humanized your culture enough where everyone feels comfortable, you may as well start from zero. It's never going to work.
Or just don't even bother, because I was chatting with someone yesterday about this very topic, and so I'd be interested in sort of building on what you said. So I'd be interested in your perspective on how we can support leaders here. And we've got these great hiring practices. So let's say we use the toolkit that you so kindly have developed at SmartRecruiters, and it's available, like you said, for anyone to use. We've implemented some of those strategies, and we're moving the needle. We're on the journey. You sell people then a bill of goods. They get the goods, and it's like, whoa, this isn't at all, to your point. So the inclusion and belonging aspect hasn't been addressed. How do we best support our leaders in creating these workplaces or these environments? Because it is a workplace responsibility as well, but it is up to every single leader. What can leaders do to help create a greater sense of belonging and inclusion within their teams?
It's really interesting. I'm doing inclusive leadership training with my own team right now. And I strongly recommend that if someone really kind of wants to know, where do I start? Like, I'm new on this journey and I really don't know what to do, how to start, what it all means. I would pick up Jennifer Brown's How to Be an Inclusive Leader. Jennifer has an incredible story herself. If you're further along in the journey, JBC Consulting can help you if you need a consulting piece. But let me tell you, she has a continuum of how diverse leaders really become advocates, right? And what I want you guys to know is it's not about judgment. It's about opportunity, right? And so I think sometimes why diversity is so difficult to be able to face is because guess what? If we get it wrong, now it feels like a values attack. You're attacking my personal values. This isn't like I screwed up the spreadsheet because I didn't know how to put a formula in it, right? Then you teach me the formula and it goes okay. When you are really looking at becoming a more inclusive leader, it is a commitment and it's going to challenge biases and values and beliefs that you have held for years that started when you were growing up. And look, the truth of the matter is we all have biases. They're wired into us to protect us from things. It's okay to have bias. It's okay to have privilege. What it's not okay to do is to continue with this attitude of, but I'm a good person. I didn't intend to do this, right? So it's okay. We were just listening to a TED Talk from Simon Sinek. It's his empathy TED Talk. It's been viewed like, I don't know, God knows how many millions of times. But it struck me on there that he said, being a leader comes with a personal sacrifice. And I think that sacrifice is a little bit deeper when you make a decision to be an inclusive leader. And so I think the thing I'd want leaders to know is it's about how you look at people. It's challenging yourself. It's understanding where your biases are, how they show up. How do you show up? It's having the EQ to be able to present yourself in a way where other people know that they can show up, right? And here's the really tough thing. Being an inclusive leader, it ain't about you. And that's the thing that people don't want to let go of because they want to be, you want to feel good about how you feel as a leader. Inclusive leadership has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with how your people feel. With
those you lead. If I can build on that, I want to tell or suggest to our listeners right now that should be relieving to hear, not stressful to hear. Because when you don't make it about yourself, you show up with curiosity and compassion, you genuinely listen. So we're not talking about anything new here. People have heard these terms before. This is what we teach our kids in kindergarten. This is what we needed to know. We learned in kindergarten. Right. I think I put a Facebook post about that about a year ago. Truly true. So we show up with those very human traits again. And those you lead will give you the clues. They will tell you through their words, or they will show you through their language, or how it is that they respond to you. They will show you and tell you how they want and need to be treated. And so you pivot and just ride that wave along with them. So that's the good news, friends. It is. And it's not about singling out one particular type of person. It needs to be integrated into your leadership style because there's multiple dimensions of diversity that are seen and not seen. And you don't want to make assumptions, right? And one thing you could walk away and do today, we're working through this. It's in Jennifer's book. We're working through this and we're practicing it. And quite frankly, it's something I've done for years and I can tell you it works. When you're with your team, when you're having one-on-ones with people, say to them, what can I do for you? How can I help and support you? And now you have to be willing to do it. It doesn't work if you're not willing to listen with open hearts and open minds and then act on it. But if you truly tell people and you build trust of how can I help and support you? And then you actually help and support them and they begin to trust you to do that and you continue to do it. People will tell you what they need, but it has to be sincere and authentic. And I think that's the struggle. And you can't be defensive as a leader because you're worried about how you're feeling. You need to make space for how your people are feeling. This is just like, I've got goosebumps here. I think this is such an exciting time for conscious leaders. It is a difficult and challenging time, but when there is difficulty and challenge, there is opportunity. And I really think the world is calling for, it has been for a while, but the time is right, if it ever has been, for this new sort of conscious leader to really take root and take flight. I'm actually writing a book right now. It's called Humanizing Leadership. It should be out in the next couple of months. I know. Thank you. And its pillars are emotional intelligence, mindfulness, positive psychology, and science. And so it's really the integration of all those. And there's a chapter on inclusion without the regular rhetoric around the ROI. I'd be interested in your perspective on, we've talked for so many years, so many embarrassing years, in my opinion, about the ROI of diversity and inclusion, and omitting the humanity behind it, or somehow that's the after effect. That's, and by the way, it's also the right thing to do. I think that's actually, if we just pause for a moment and actually listen to what we have been saying for these years, well, I don't like to actually put shame on people, but it's just collectively, it's shameful we have approached it that way. Can you talk to me about your thoughts on flipping that approach or changing that narrative? Yeah,
it's really interesting. When we saw the explosion of interest around Black Lives Matter last year, I have to tell you, my initial response as a Black woman was to be very angry. And I'll tell you why. Black men and Black women have been unjustly murdered in my community for years. In fact, since we were killed and brought over on boats, right? Like, this has been happening for years. It's not like we didn't all know it. And so there was a part of me that felt like COVID, I felt like everybody was sitting at home and didn't have enough to do, so they were going to jump on this bandwagon. Right. And it pissed me off, quite frankly, because I've been on this bandwagon for a very long time. This has been my community. This has been my life. And then, ultimately, I'm a God girl, and I believe in assuming people have positive intent, right? And so then I realized that I think we just got to the point where people couldn't ignore it anymore, right? And I think we're in a place right now where we're looking for companies to be more responsible, right? We're talking about stakeholder capitalism. We're talking about, look at the statistics, 78% of people who go to work for a company, I think this is a Glassdoor stat, expect you to be doing something right around diversity, right? That's the bottom line. That's 78% are not all people who are underrepresented. Mm-hmm. That's 78% of all people, because at least 78% of all people think we should just be doing the right thing, right? And so now I think what's going to happen is that you had all of these companies last year. My gosh, I think, they're one of the largest diversity pledges. I think 1,400 CEOs signed that pledge, right? And everybody's made a pledge. I think what's going to happen as we come into this year is there's going to be a reckoning and an accountability held to that. Right? You look at companies like Just Capital, who are looking across the spectrum of how corporations become more just. And I think we're at this time in our lives and in our society where all of us just want to be a little bit more of a just society. So I am not, like my husband calls me a money grubbing capitalist pig. Like I am not ignorant to business. We all need to make money. We all need to survive. And so we can give you all the stats you want. Look at McKinsey, look at BWC. It will tell you on average, companies perform financially probably 30% better if they have diversity at leadership, et cetera. I do believe that what's not measured does not matter. And so I understand you need a business case. But if that's the only reason you are doing it, then the problem comes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? So here's your kind of approach and how we wrap it all together. If you're doing this because you don't want to get called out, and so you're doing these check the box exercises. They're not going to be efforts that are sustainable. They will not be authentic. They will not permeate the fabric of your culture and your environment. And it's going to backfire on you, right? So I think if you're going to go down this road, you really need to take a step back and say, what does this mean in our organization? What do we want to commit to? Can we make simple changes that we can sustain, that are supported by our leadership, that will lead to substantial change, right? People don't expect you to be perfect, but they expect to be proud of the progress you're making, and you need to be proud of the progress you're making. It's not a simple answer.
And I love that it's not, because that's the truth. And I think that's why one of the many reasons we've failed to make progress over the last however many years, decades that we've been working and putting money towards these types of efforts is I think we've oversimplified the solution. We've oversimplified what the problem was and oversimplified the solution, and it's not been fulsome enough. There's just so much goodness there. I want to shift gears slightly because before we started this show, you were sharing with me personal example and story around when your career really took off. And I think that's a really incredible story and can be really inspiring for others listening, and really speaks to the need for us to be embracing everyone's humanity and all of their wonderful quirks and glory. So can you tell us a little bit about that stage in your career?
Sure. So I have been in recruiting now for 30 plus years. Whether I was hands-on a recruiter, stumbled into it. If you ask 100 recruiters how they came into it, you're going to get 100 different answers. Had grown up through leadership. And so remember this was back in 2006-ish. And truly, a colleague of mine who was on maternity leave at the time, by the way, was promoted into a role that hadn't been posted. And I was very frustrated by that. And I asked for some feedback, and I got the feedback, and I understood what the feedback was, and I understood why it was. When I boiled the feedback down to me, it was that I was not playing politics. That's what it felt like to me. And that's how I took it. And I remember calling my husband, which I don't do very often from work, and saying, oh my gosh, we've got these 4 kids and I'm in middle management and I'm never going to make it past this point because this is not something I'm willing to do. And you've got to figure out how we're going to raise these 4 kids on this crappy salary I made, right? Because God loved my husband. We had made a decision for one of us to be a stay-at-home parent. And my husband is the best stay-at-home parent ever. And so I made a decision at that point in time. I actually pivoted my career. I pivoted who I worked for, and I decided that I was going to be the best me I could be. I was going to focus on the things that I did well. I no longer really particularly cared about climbing some ladder that didn't seem like it had a place for me. This was also about the time that I was turning 40. And I decided that I was the person that couldn't wait to be 40. At that time, I wrote The Grown-Ass Woman Rules, Rights, and Responsibilities, and which has evolved into our Grown Woman Life podcast and our website, but it really has evolved into this mantra of being bold, brilliant, and badass. And it's kind of saying, here's who I am. I know what I do well. I know what I have to offer. I'm not going to shrink myself to make you more comfortable. I'm going to fill up the space, and those who like it will like it, and those who don't. But I no longer care about external validation. I'm really look in the mirror and go, am I living according to my values? Is what's God telling me? Will my family be okay with it? And after that, I'm going to move on. And I feel like once I decided to show up as who I am, my career started to take off, and again, I put my head down. I focus on what I do really, really well. And I continue to do it. I focus on making space for others and helping others to do what they do really well. And then my career has just taken off, right? It is amazing to me. I think for a very long time, all of those things that I thought are parts of myself that I would hide because they would make people uncomfortable are part of the things that I think right now people are embracing.
Right. Totally cliche, but those really are your superpowers.
Yeah.
Right.
They really are.
They really are. And so those listening now who have teams, well, actually, I'd like you to consider those questions yourself and ponder that yourself. What do you do really well? And are you bringing that every day? Are you making yourself small in any way? Are you being your bold, brilliant, badass self? And then I think just being able to look at how can I help my team members be their bold, brilliant, badass self as well is really, really powerful. You may choose different words, choose whatever words resonate with you and your team. But I think that's what great leaders do, right? Great leaders have teams that do have turnover because they get promoted or they do move on from the company because you have been that light for them.
I think the best way to measure your success as a leader, not as a manager, is what is the legacy? What are the pathways that the people around you are taking? Are they growing and developing? And ultimately, I feel like I hate managing people. I love leading people. Mm-hmm. So the best job I can do is when I know that a team that's working with me, right, could do the job if I was there or if I wasn't. That's when I know I've done it right, because they're empowered to do what they need to do. And they are using their strengths, which I've given them room to test and make mistakes, et cetera, and they can fly on their own without me or with me. That's when you know you've done a great job.
I mean, we hear about failure a lot, and I don't think it gets enough real attention because, we hear that you need to fail to succeed, and there's all sorts of cliches around it all. And yet I don't think there are many workplaces or leaders who create a safe place to actually fail. It's like failure is really an F word. It's like a swear word, isn't it really? How can we create greater spaces? Like, how do you create safe space for employees to fail and those that you work with to fail?
Yeah. So I think it's a really interesting question because I think in corporate right now, we're all feeling so much pressure, right? And I think especially in a time where people are being furloughed and laid off and workforces are shrinking, there's this, certainly in today's climate, there's this fear of making a mistake because then I might be the one on the line, right? And I need to take care of my family. And as a leader, you're no different. And as a leader, you feel that pressure in a much more significant way because we all know that we are accountable for what our team does, right? So this isn't an easy thing to do, but I think it goes back to culture, right? And I think the minute you accept the fact that no one is perfect, then you actually understand that people are going to make mistakes. And the only choice you really have is, are they actually going to tell you about the mistakes and let you support them through it? Or are they just going to let it all blow up in your face because it's too scary? And then what do you do when people make mistakes, right? And how do you coach people around it, right? And so I think it's really about, and a mistake is something different than just a detrimental behavior in a work environment. We know when people are just doing silly things that are stupid, they don't care, they're not cultural fits. That's not what I'm talking about. But when someone either we've given them a stretch assignment and they can't hit it, or they've made a mistake, big or little, how much time do we focus on the mistake versus looking at why the mistake happened? and what's the lesson learned and how do we move forward? And do you not understand that if you own the ownership for when they make the mistake with your bosses, then you own it here and you say, goes back to that question, how can I help and support you? Like, did you have the right resources? Did I give you the right training? Like, what could I have done to help you to not make this mistake? And what are we going to do about it moving forward? Like, you have to be a partner in that mistake.
Partner in the mistake, I think, is really significant there. I recall a really great boss saying to me once when I approached him with a mistake that I made, and I felt sick. Like, no one likes to admit their mistakes. I mean, let's be honest, you don't bring them forward with ease. I was feeling sick. It really wasn't the end of the world, but it was still a mistake that needed to come forward and be rectified quite quickly. And right away, he owned that. You know, he owned what his part was in that mistake occurring, and was really, really specific. I think he took a little too much, and I shared that with him. But then the focus was less on what had happened and that it had happened, and actually moving forward. So I love what you shared there, and I think
there's another piece here. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That I just thought about too. We don't like conflict. And so therefore we don't like to give constructive feedback, right? And we hold that feedback back, or we dilute it so much that a person didn't understand what the heck we've said. You know, we've been taught to sandwich it, you know, give them a compliment and then feed it in and then sandwich it and say it this way. And by the time
shit sandwich, it's a
shit sandwich. And guess what? I don't even realize I'm eating shit because I'm so confused by what you've said to me, right? Because you've polished it all up and I don't know what we're talking about. And I think the other thing that leaders can do is to give constructive feedback along the way as a risk mitigation strategy for these mistakes, right? And so I tell people, and I sincerely mean this, and look, I'm a whole lot of energy and I'm a whole lot, and I have really high expectations. And I'm sure anybody who's ever worked for me would tell you I am no like shrinking violet, but they know I've got their back, and they know when I tell them something tough, I do it out of love so that they don't have to get it from the outside world. And I will stand in front of them and take the bullet, but they also know that they're going to get the truth so that they can learn and grow. And I think that's the other thing that we don't know. We could actually prevent some mistakes if we are giving constructive feedback along the way. Clear, constructive feedback.
Clear is kind.
It is
Brene Brown that says that clear is kind. And it really was a lot that she has said that has stuck with me. And that is absolutely one of them. So I have a final question for you. I think it's going to be 2 parts, but I'll start with this. So is there a leader or a person, past or present, who you have looked up to or sort of modeled your own leadership style after?
Wow. I will tell you, I've been really lucky, blessed in my career to have leaders almost at every point in my career who taught me something, and not only taught me something about leadership, but taught me something about who I was. So there's honestly so many names along that list. In fact, I did a LinkedIn post when I moved into this job, and I was like, here are just some of the people that I'm grateful for. And the list was so long. And it's not just the leaders who have taught me things. It's the people who have worked, quote unquote, for me, the people who have worked with me. You can learn and evolve your leadership style from things that you learn from a variety of people. Right. And so I did that post, and I was intending to do it once, and it was too many names. I had to do it in 2 posts. So I would tell you I've been really, really lucky. And I would also say that the lessons that I've learned in being a wife and mother have probably been some of the toughest lessons learned and the best ones in terms of I can't think of a more important leadership role than being responsible for the lives of someone else. So I can't call out one name. And I would think that for me, my leadership style has evolved over time because someone at each stage of my career has impacted me profoundly.
I think that's beautiful. I'm definitely checking out that LinkedIn post, and I will also include your LinkedIn profile, if I may, in the show notes.
Absolutely.
I said that was going to be the last question. I have to comment on a couple of things you said because it's just so beautiful. One of them, you were talking about having learned so much as a wife and a mother, and there's nothing more important than being responsible for the lives of someone else. And that, I believe, is also a responsibility of a leader in the workplace. When you sign up to be a leader of others, you are signing up for the responsibility for the lives of someone else. They have joined your organization and they are entrusting you with a big part of their life. They spend more time in their organization at working with and for you than anywhere else in their life. And if that's not a responsibility, I don't know what is.
Agreed. And if you listen to that TED Talk by Simon Sinek, he says that too.
Yeah.
It's a responsibility.
Okay.
He does.
Okay. Well, we're checking that out. That too will be in the show notes. And this for real is my last question. If you have, I could talk to you all day long. If there's one final message that you perhaps have not shared yet that you would like to share with my listeners around how they can humanize their leadership, what would that final message be?
I think it's around this concept, right, of take the responsibility seriously. Recognize that I think so many times, we have this vision in our minds of climbing a ladder and the power and privilege that comes with a certain title, right? Because that's how we have been conditioned to view success. And if I could impart any one thing, I would challenge you to look at your view of success in terms of the impact you have on other human beings. And if you think about your success in terms of not necessarily now getting the next title or the next promotion, but if you think about success in terms of this responsibility you have to the people who work for you, and if your bonus was paid on how you treated them and how you've elevated them and how you've supported them, what kind of bonus would you get this year? My bonus comes when I have someone that calls me that says, I'm here because you did this. That's why I get up in the morning. And I've been blessed that the promotions and the money have come with that. And that's been a great, great thing. But for me, the real payoff goes when someone says, you have impacted my life.
I love that, Rocki. And I really want to give you the credit, though, of that conversation that you shared with us, that you had with your husband when you were telling him that, you've kind of capped out in your career. And then you decided that you were going to live a bold, brilliant, and badass life, that things took off. And that is when we live in those types of, when we make those choices for ourselves and live in alignment, like you said, with your values and in service to others. These opportunities then, which seemingly come your way, but that alignment really can work seemingly like magic. Rocki, thank you from the bottom of my heart, truly, for sharing this time with us, for sharing your energy, your passion, and your expertise with my listeners. I'm thrilled to have made this connection with you and shared this time with you.
I'm honored. Thank you for sharing with me, not only your audience and that trust that you've given me, but thank you for being in my tribe of bold, brilliant, badass women. Appreciate you, Louise.
Thank you so much, Rocki. And thanks to all of you. We'll see you next week. You've been listening to Humanizing Leadership with Louise H. Reed, along with today's amazing guest, Rocki Howard. You'll find links to her work and website and all the amazing resources that Rocki shared with us in the show notes on whatever podcast platform you're listening on, as well as in today's notes and quotes, which you can get directly to your inbox by subscribing to my email list at louisehreed.com. Podcast theme music is from Ben Sound, so thank you very much to them. And of course, thanks to all of you for listening. If you've enjoyed today's show, please tell a friend and subscribe. I also invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. And finally, a special thank you to Contact Talk Radio Network, my podcast production team, Cameron Steele, and of course, Jay Andrews. Thanks again, my friends, and we'll see you all next week.